You are listening to a Clarkesworld Magazine podcast. I'm your host and narrator, Kate Baker. Greetings, Clarkesworld citizens. I hope this podcast finds you well. This story, along with all of our other stories, both in the past and those yet to come, along with our nonfiction, our art, our podcast, and payment for staff, is made possible all through your ongoing support. So if you're a subscriber, if you've gone to patreon.com/Clarkesworld, if you've chucked a couple of bucks our way via a donation, every little bit helps. Also, if you can't afford to do so, just being here is amazing. Listening to yet another podcast, telling a friend about a story that you like, sending us an email out of your busy day to let us know how we're doing. Those all count too. So thank you from the bottom of my heart. You let me continue to do something I love to do. Our story is titled The Job Interview. It is by Carrie Vaughn. Carrie Vaughn's work includes the Philip K. Dick award-winning novel Bannerless, the New York Times best-selling Kitty Norville urban fantasy series, over 20 novels and upwards of 100 short stories, 2 of which have been finalists for the Hugo Award. Her latest novel, The Naturalist Society, is about 19th century ornithologists, awkward love triangles, and the magic of binomial nomenclature. An Air Force brat, she survived her nomadic childhood and managed to put down roots in Boulder, Colorado. And if you like what you hear, you can go back to 4 stories Carrie's had with us here in Clarkesworld. Amalia, Vast and Trunkless Legs of Stone, Polly and Not Charles Conquer the Solar System, and Astrophilia. So, my dear listener, I hope that you can sit back, relax, and let me tell you a story. 2. Navcom Supervisor Rinzelli. From Crew Chief Jeng. Priority? Urgent. Hi, Lyle. Hope you've had some coffee. The topside comms array is still glitching, and engineering hasn't lifted a finger to run diagnostics. They said the work order has to come from your end. Shouldn't take long once they get it. Happy simulated morning to you. To Crew Chief Jeng. From Navcom Supervisor Rinzelli. Priority urgent. It's always something. I sent that work order yesterday. That would be just like life on Ross Station. To have the work order to fix the comms get swallowed by the glitch in comms. I'll walk down there if I have to. Thanks for the warm greetings. I'll have you know I read your memo before coffee and lived to tell the tale. Lyle only spent about 15 minutes trying to contact the engineering department. Her messages bounced, and her VidCom request received an automated, out-of-office response. Someone had to be there. The engineering department was staffed at all hours for emergencies just like this. Not that this was an emergency yet. Her job was to keep it from becoming one. She could spend an hour chasing the work order from her station, but it would likely be faster just going there herself. So true to her word, or threat. She marched down to engineering because apparently that was the only way to learn what was actually happening over there. Roth Station was a rotating drum. Ops and engineering were on the same level, but on opposite sides. The debate, to go through the center or to walk around the ring corridor, was mostly philosophical. Between dealing with shifting gravity through the center or traversing the longer distance around the ring, the 2 routes took roughly the same amount of time. Lyle usually picked the center route just because she was less likely to run into people she didn't want to talk to. It was also meditative, floating through the center core and imagining just for a moment that she was somewhere else. In deep space on a scout ship, maybe. Someplace where no one nagged her about unfinished work orders because the work just got done. She hauled herself down the ladder past the hub where gravity returned and planted her feet firmly on the corridor's mat. Engineering was down a passage and through a hatch. These were the utilitarian areas of the station, with spare lighting and unpainted walls and signage that was more practical than aesthetic. Truthfully, Lyle found the lack of any decoration comforting. This was about the work, not about appearances. She arrived at the engineering section. The hatch to the workstation stood open, which she took as an invitation. Gelbart, engineering supervisor, was at the center console, eating what looked like a sandwich straight out of the cello wrapper and getting crumbs all over the monitor deck. One of his underlings was at another console, head propped on hand, staring at a display and occasionally punching a button for no discernible reason. She paused at the hatchway, waiting for them to notice her. They did not. "Hi," she said finally. Still chewing, Gelbart calmly looked up. The underling flinched, then tried to look busy, leaning intently over the console. "Rinzelli," Gelbart said by way of greeting, his mouth half full. "You should have gotten a work order for me yesterday. I've been trying to find out what happened to it." "Work order?" His brow furrowed. "Yeah." "About what?" "Glitchy comms. Mainly the topside comms array, but we might be having problems with internal comms as well." She repeated some calming aphorisms to herself before adding, "I tried to call you, but didn't get an answer. I'm glad there was an emergency taking up your attention." "You called?" "I got an out-of-office auto-response." Calmly, always calmly, Gelbart looked over his shoulder. "Bez." "Huh? Oh, I must have forgotten to take it down after the thing." "What thing?" Lyle wondered, but knew better than to ask. She tried again. "I just need to know the status of the work order to run diagnostics on the comms array." Gelbart shook his head, and her heart sank. "We didn't get it." "Okay," she said. "I'll send it again." "We didn't get it because all work orders need to be routed through the station's supervisor's office." That didn't make any sense. Since when? "Order's right here." He tapped one of his monitors and she went to read over his shoulder. "To all section sub-supervisors from Station Chief Supervisor Morgenstern. Priority, double urgent. To better facilitate efficient management of station resources and workflow, all work orders requests to any department must be first submitted to the Office of the Station Crew Supervisor, effective immediately. Direct inquiries to Assistant Chief Supervisor's office." She'd never seen this order. Did everyone get this but her? The address list was hidden, so that didn't tell her anything. Was she left off intentionally, or was this part of the comms glitch? Was this a software problem, or a hardware problem, or an office politics problem? She was really beginning to hate this place. Scratch that. She was nearing the end of hating this place. Something was going to give soon. This used to be a great job. She used to love it here at Ross, a scrappy little mining transfer outpost that was big enough to be interesting, but small enough to know just about everyone and really be able to get her hands dirty. She'd learned a lot at this job, but that was under the old station supervisor, Kearney, and his team. Then he'd retired, the new supervisor came in, and, well, Lyle was the last of the old station supervisory crew still standing. Everyone else had quit. She was the only one brave or stupid enough to stick with it. "So, to clarify," she said, "you won't run the diagnostic without getting a work order from Morgenstern, even with me standing right here asking for it." "Hey, I don't make the rules." He brushed crumbs off the front of his uniform jacket. "Thanks," she said curtly, and walked out. She had become suspicious. She hated that she had become suspicious. Her workstation was isolated in a compartment a couple branches off the main ops corridor and closer to the outer hull, where she could get inputs for various communications systems. She also had a tiny viewport that looked out across Roth's exterior. Sometimes, when the station was rotated toward the dark, she caught herself staring out, watching the blinking lights of satellites and arrays, planetary shuttles, and incoming transports against the backdrop of distant stars, and a longing daze with a desire to be anywhere but here. Most of the other section supervisors had their stations clustered toward the forward end of the station, with its more prestigious views and accommodations. Had she been excluded from the memo on purpose, or did the chief supervisor's office just forget she was there? Didn't matter. She was here to do a job, not speculate on the motivation of others. The assistant chief supervisor was a guy named Mel Dirk. He'd been hired to replace the previous assistant who quit after just a month of working with Morgenstern. 2. Assistant Chief Supervisor Dirk, from Navcom Supervisor Rinzelli. Priority, urgent. This morning, I discovered that I have not been receiving procedural memos. Gelbart just informed me of the memo stating that all work orders should be directed to the station supervisor office. I'd appreciate if you could check into why I haven't been receiving recent memos, and also please forward me any important recent memos I might have missed. Much appreciated. Attached, please find the work order requesting a diagnostic of the topside nav array, which should be completed before any interruptions in communication become critical. Lyle moved on to the rest of her work queue, busy but not onerous. Some scheduling issues with the staff, approving an inspection rota for internal comms. She might move that up the priority list. An incoming message beeped her out of her flow. 2. Navcom Sub-Supervisor Rinzelli from Assistant Chief Supervisor Dirk. Priority, double urgent. Hey there. Sorry for confusion. It seems the job title on your messaging ID is wrong. Memos are filtered by job title. Yours didn't get updated to the new designation and you just slipped through. Mea culpa. I fixed it now. Should be good. Also, I believe the content of your previous memo rated a double urgent priority label. Cheers. She had to double-check the message header to figure out what he meant by updated job titles, and for a long time she just stared. Sub-supervisor? Sub-supervisor. Turned out she didn't get the memo about that either. Her title was Navcom Supervisor. It had always been Navcom Supervisor. It was the job she'd been hired for 3 years ago. Who changed it? Why? This didn't make sense. The explanation was going to take more than 2 lines of a memo. She requested a video meeting. Dirk's face appeared on the monitor. He made an effort to act younger than he was, a slick haircut, his uniform collar jauntily open, smile plastered thick. Skin strangely plasticized with spa treatments. Right now it appeared stretched in a picture shock. Lyle, what's wrong? What's happening? Nothing's wrong. Something must be wrong. You're using VidCom. Well, it's easier than a memo, she said. No one uses VidCom. Memos are standard. Dirk, why the change in job titles? Sub-supervisor? Really? The tension drained away into an expression of self-assured ease. Right. Ellen thought it was confusing, the section heads and station head all being called supervisor. She thought this would make the organizational structure more clear. Funny, nobody ever got confused when Kearney was station supervisor, but Ellen Morgenstern wasn't Kearney. Ellen Morgenstern wanted everyone to call her by her first name because she believed doing so promoted a friendlier working environment. I must have missed that memo, Lyle said flatly. Yeah, Dirk drawled. Sorry about that. Just so long as I'm looped in from here out? Of course. He glanced at another monitor, distracted. Well then, I'll let you go. She started to thank him again out of politeness, but he logged off. Back to the memo mines. 2. Station Supervisor Morgenstern from Navcom Sub-Supervisor Rinzelli. Priority? Urgent. Hi, Ellen. I hope you're having a good morning. I understand that work orders are now being routed through your office. I've attached a work order that I sent to engineering yesterday to run diagnostics on a comm array that's been having problems. It should probably be looked at sooner rather than later. Thank you. She hit send and hoped that this would be the last she had to think of it. Engineering would get the work order, run the diagnostics, the glitch would be fixed, all would be well. She was also very aware that this would probably not be the end of it. She couldn't tell if the cramping in her stomach was lunchtime hunger or simmering rage. Fortunately, she was able to get through a whole raft of entirely normal, mundane tasks like equipment requisitions and staffing reviews. Since Morgenstern came on board, Lyle had made an extra effort to record good reviews for her staff, to cover them if and when the chief supervisor staffing ambition spread past the supervisor organizational level. No undeserving demotions would happen on Lyle's watch. Well, except for her own, evidently. 2. Navcom Sub-Supervisor Rinzelli from Cargo Crew Chief Elliston. Priority? Double urgent. Hey, Lyle. Did you get my memo about problems with the topside comms array? I sent it 2 days ago. Thing is glitching. Here's what I'm getting from traffic control. Attached to this was a copy of a memo that was all garbled text, dropped letters, and coding symbols that made Lyle's eyes cross. Even the sender and recipient lines were mush. In a moment of pure whimsy, she wondered if it might be a secret code, and if so, what it said. Maybe, you need to find a new job. It wasn't code, it was a mashed comms system. Too bad internal comms weren't glitching. If Morgenstern couldn't read all those memos she insisted on reviewing, she might get on that work order a little faster. To Cargo Crew Chief Elliston, from Navcom Sub-Supervisor, Renzelli. Priority urgent. Hey, Sue, I'm sorry I didn't. I suspect this has something to do with the recent request that all work orders get routed through Morgenstern's office. Did you get that memo? I just found out about it this morning. I submitted a priority request for a diagnostic on the array. We should get this nailed down soon. Thanks for letting me know. Notifications immediately pinged another message coming in. To Navcom Sub-Supervisor Renzelli, from Assistant Chief Station Supervisor Dirk. Priority, double urgent. Hey there. The station supervisor's office has received your work order regarding diagnostics on the topside comms array. Chief Supervisor Morgenstern has questions about whether this particular comms array falls under our jurisdiction or is it not instead the responsibility of Trade Guild Systems Division, given that it handles off-station comms. Could you please submit the information regarding the proper jurisdiction? We wouldn't want to spend resources that should be part of another organization's budget. Ha ha! This array was how Roth Station communicated with everyone. All incoming and outgoing comms transmissions routed through there. The station couldn't manage flight traffic without that array. Why would it be Trade Guild Sysdiv's problem? Roth was part of an independent mining operation. Trade Guild had a single 2-person office here handling mining regulations and cargo inspections. Lyle did not want to spend her afternoon sorting through organizational documents. This was stupid. One solution occurred to her, a Gordian knot kind of solution, slicing right through the entire bureaucracy in one fell swoop. 2. Station Supervisor Morgenstern, CC, all section sub-supervisors, from Navcom Sub-Supervisor Renzelli. Priority urgent. I hereby submit my resignation from the position of Navcom Sub-Supervisor of Roth Station effective immediately. Thank you. She didn't send this memo. Instead, she hid it away in an unmarked data cache where she put everything she wanted to keep off the network. She thought about quitting before this when she realized she was the last of Kearney's old staff still standing. Writing an actual resignation memo was as close as she'd gotten. Wasn't as cathartic as she was hoping. Given the situation with the topside comms array, she probably wouldn't be able to leave Roth, even if she did quit. As she saw it, she had 2 options: find the documentation Dirk was asking for, or go out to the comms array and run the diagnostics herself. Maybe she could find a more appropriate compromise. And then, things got worse. 2. Navcom Sub-Supervisor Renzelli, from Alice Mining Corps Director Blakely. Priority double urgent. Lyle, I might have a situation here. As a precaution, I'd like to double ore shipments through the afternoon. Please arrange cargo docks and crews and transmit traffic authorizations as soon as possible. Well, wasn't that something? The mining operation on Alice 3, the planet Roth Station served as a hub for, had always had issues, everything from unstable geology to labor disputes. Blakely wasn't one to panic or catastrophize, so whatever was going on must have been serious. A thrill bubbled up in the back of Lyle's mind, something interesting. A challenge. She briefly wondered if Blakely would answer his vidcom, but she didn't want to interrupt whatever he was in the middle of. As curious as she was, her job right now wasn't to figure out what was going on. It was getting docks ready for the new shipments. That was going to be way more difficult without the topside array. Well, they just have to make it happen anyway. 2. Alice Mining Corp Director Blakely, from Navcom Sub-Supervisor Renzelli. Priority double urgent. Understood. Please be advised we've been having problems with the topside comms array, which will affect traffic control. We're working to resolve the issue before it becomes critical. This gave her a good reason to prod engineering into action, which she promptly did, or at least attempted to do. 2. Engineering Sub-Supervisor Gelbart, from Navcom Sub-Supervisor Renzelli. Priority double urgent. Under Section 4, Line 12 of the Ross Station Code of Maintenance Regulations, I'm independently authorizing the work order to run diagnostics. This is a time-sensitive situation in which the normal flow of communication has been disrupted, and to maintain station functions, work must be implemented immediately. I'll submit the explanatory forms momentarily. Lyle allowed herself a moment of pride. How very satisfying, implementing a job the way it was supposed to be done. Next thing was to complete all the forms needed to cover her ass for going behind the back of the supervisor's office. Though it did occur to her, would Morgenstern and Dirk even notice? She was excited to find out. Gelbart responded almost immediately, which gave her a sinking feeling because he never did anything immediately. To Navcom Sub-Supervisor Rinzelli. From Engineering Sub-Supervisor Gelbart. Priority, double urgent. I'm afraid I'll have to forward your request to Station Supervisor Morgenstern to confirm the time-sensitive situation designation. Please stand by. She would not please stand by. This was a space station with 500 residents that served as a transit hub for a mining colony of 10,000, and they were inexorably edging towards crisis, which would require filling out even more documentation, and she wanted to avoid that. For the second time that day, Lyle hauled herself to the engineering department, and not even the liminal low-G turnover at the hub could calm her down. Storming the last stretch of corridor before engineering, she almost collided with a couple of techs and managed to mumble apologies rather than yelling that they should be working on the comms array. They were internal systems techs. They wouldn't know anything about comms. One of them stopped and did an actual double take at her. Supervisor, ma'am, Crew Chief Jang is looking for you. Is this about the topside comms array? She asked mid-strike, turning to face him. No. I mean, yes, but not just that. He was a young guy full of polish with brown puppy dog eyes bouncing on his toes, eager to get the words out. This is about traffic monitoring. Another glitch? Oh, that was fine. Why not pile on the problems and deal with everything at once? Maybe. Traffic control reported an anomaly on the sensors, but given the glitches in the array, they thought it might be a ghost, part of the same malfunction. They're getting error codes. This wasn't a normal systems glitch. Her instincts were usually pretty good, and a giant flashing red alarm went off in the back of her brain. Something much bigger was going on here. Right. Okay. She told the tech, steeling herself. I'm on the comms array. Blakely is sending us more traffic, so we'll need to clear docks for him. If we have to do it the old-fashioned way with manual signal relays, then we will. You want me to send Chief Jang the memo about that? She sighed with relief. Yes, please. Thank you. I'll recommend you for all the promotions if you do that. He smiled happily. Ma'am? That poor kid, he was setting himself up for a lifetime of solving other people's problems just like she had. In engineering, Gelbart was at his workstation staring at monitors and eating what appeared to be an entirely different sandwich than the one he'd been eating just a couple hours earlier. That one had been on a brownish whole wheat style bread. This one appeared to be on some kind of yeasty roll. Had Lyle eaten lunch today? She couldn't remember. The tech from earlier was at a different workstation staring at a different monitor. She still couldn't tell exactly what he was doing. Gelbart? The tech flinched at the edge in her voice. Jumpy guy, wasn't he? Gelbart merely glanced up. Her presence here seemed to evoke no emotional response. Gelbart, we need to fix that comms array now. Then get that work order. I'm overriding the work order requested under Section 4. You know what? Never mind. She marched over to an empty workstation, logged in her credentials, and took over the entire engineering workflow. Red lights flashed on a couple of monitors. She didn't care. Gelbart dropped the sandwich and stood. You can't do that. In terms of basic capability, she very well could do it, but he wasn't talking about skills. He was talking about permissions and boundaries and hierarchies, and in those terms, she was way, way out of line. She wasn't thinking about hierarchies, permission, Roth Station management, or the bottom line of the Alice Mining Corporation. She just wanted things to run the way they were supposed to, and she didn't want anyone to get killed because things weren't working right. It turns out You can do pretty much anything if you're willing to face the consequences, she said with weaponized cheerfulness. It took just 5 minutes to get the diagnostics started. She gave priority to the topside array, then the traffic system, and for good measure, scheduled diagnostics for everything else in case some buggy code had gotten loose in the whole system. If the problem was in the software, she could upload patches to get them through the day, then set up a whole system reboot when they had some time. While she waited, she routed her messages to this workstation and braced for what she had missed in the last 30 minutes. A whole raft of memos had piled up, telling her everything she already knew, but with increasing levels of urgency as the problems compounded. Blakely's shipments were en route. Cargo was scrambling to make room for them. Traffic control was screaming. The sensor ghost was still there, and control had just sent out drones to get a real-time visual on what might or might not be out there. Then a new alert, glowing and adversarial scarlet, landed. 2. Station Supervisor Morgenstern. CC, all section sub-supervisors. From Alice Mining Corps Director Blakely. Priority, double urgent, code red. This is an emergency declaration. We have a full-on labor strike on the surface. Directorial staff is locked in our offices. Internal comms shut down. Please alert the company. Please advise. Almost simultaneously, another angry red alert landed. To Navcom Sub-Supervisor Rinzelli from Crew Chief Jang. Priority double urgent code red. Lyle, check the traffic feed. Lyle had never seen a double urgent code red classification before, and here she had 2 of them in a row. The messages glowed faintly, hypnotically. Then she had to actually focus on what was happening. The labor situation on Alice 3 had finally boiled over. Okay, that was Morgenstern's responsibility, though the odds of Morgenstern actually doing anything. Lyle put the thought aside for the moment and did as Jang asked. This sounded like the traffic feeds were working again. If so, why the double urgent code red priority? She checked the feed and the situation immediately clarified. A gunship was screaming toward Roth, burning hard to slow its approach. It might or might not crash into them. This might have been a scare tactic. It was working. Not a sensor ghost, not a software glitch. The array had been flooded with bad code. The malfunctions, the blind spots, it had all been sabotaged to keep the station blind and off balance while the ship entered the system and came at them without warning. At the same time as the labor situation on Alice 3 burst its seams. Interesting. Niall didn't know what to do. Her mental flowchart of actions had no branch for this. While she thought she ought to panic, a quiet part of her mind murmured, "Oh, thank goodness." Very soon, Roth wouldn't be her problem anymore. It was a strange, weightless relief. Then she thought of one thing she might do. It might be very stupid. At this point, everything was worth a try. 2. Incoming gunship from Ross Station Navcom Sub-Supervisor Lyle Rinzelli. Priority extreme. To the incoming gunship targeting my space station. Can you please identify yourselves and your purpose so that we might perhaps come to an understanding before anyone gets hurt? Thank you. The message needed time to travel the distance, the quickly diminishing distance between the station and ship. Lyle thought she might explode waiting for the minutes to tick down, and then, to Ross Station Navcom Sub-Supervisor Rinzelli from Trade Guild Military Division Independent Operations, Courier Visigoth. Priority. Calm down. Glad to make contact. We're here to conduct an audit of labor conditions on Alice 3 at the request of the Mining Labor Union. Please prepare docking space in good manners. Have a nice day. So, sabotage, conspiracy. What an exciting day this had turned into. The Visigoth had inside help. Of course it had. While she might have loved accusing Morgenstern or Dirk, she honestly didn't think they had it in them. The solution was a little more obvious than that. 2. Trade Guild Customs Outpost Director from Navcom Sub-Supervisor Rinzelli. Priority triple urgent priority red. Are those your people coming in hot? They might as well have been waiting for her message with their reply, already prepared. To Navcom Sub-Supervisor Rinzelli from Trade Guild Customs Outpost Director, Priority Green. I've been waiting for you to contact us. Please stand down for labor conditions audit. She sent a vid request because this seemed like the appropriate situation for one. When the call was accepted, Lyle took a moment to breathe deeply, settle herself, and put on a smile. The tense grimace of a smile, but at least she wasn't yelling. The tag on the vid image said the man was named Elgar. Lyle didn't remember ever meeting him before, but recalled his approval codes on a number of communications from Cargo. Unassuming in a dark suit, standard business professional polish, he could pass unnoticed in a crowd. Probably the idea. It was obvious he wasn't part of station personnel because he wasn't anxious or confused. Far from being annoyed at the vid request, he smiled as if pleased. Supervisor Renzelli, how are you? Murderous, she thought. I have to admit, Mr. Elgar, I'm a bit thrown off my game today. I imagine you are. She tried to find a polite, professional way to follow up and simply couldn't. Moreover, she didn't much care anymore. If you people wanted to run an audit, why didn't you alert management? Elgar was serene. At least someone was enjoying himself. Well, I think you know the answer to that. She didn't even have to think about it. Morgenstern never responded to requests. Oh yeah, he was definitely enjoying himself. On the other hand, in some situations, surprise audits give us the best results. Can we count on your cooperation, Supervisor? Will it get Morgenstern thrown out? Well, I can neither confirm nor deny. Thank you for your candor. You have a nice day. You as well, he signed off. Another flurry of memos, one to Crew Chief Jang and Cargo confirming docking space for the TGS Mildiv Visigoth. She set up auxiliary comms channels so traffic could clear the space around Roth, provided her approval for any and all authorizations. Fascinating watching the Visigoth's entirely efficient operation. Even as they decelerated for docking without crashing into anything, they were arranging shuttle transportation to the surface, sending orders to Blakely and the mining operation, and infiltrating all of Roth's internal networks to take command of the station. Technically, part of Lyle's job was trying to stop them, but she had become strangely fatalistic about the whole operation. She had one more task before the hammer dropped on them. She'd once come across an old phrase that had resonated with her: girding one's loins. Originally, it referred to an ancient style of clothing that normally draped around the legs but could be tied up around the hips in a crisis when one needed to work or fight. The phrase spoke to preparation, to putting on a sort of armor, signaling that a particular situation was about to get difficult. Lyle girded her loins, metaphorically, and marched around the next bend in the station's curve to the supervisor's office. In the corridors, people were running. Hatches were slamming shut. No alarm had sounded. There was no outward sign of the impending crisis. But word had spread, and everyone knew. Everyone would have to take care of themselves. Where else could any of them go? But for her, this had become personal. As she arrived at the closed hatch of the supervisor's office, Mel Dirk slipped out the next door over and got in her way. Hey, he said, smirking. The chief supervisor is a little busy right now. I bet she is, Lyle said. Wait, I don't think... Lyle tapped her emergency authorization on the comm panel and opened the hatch. Ellen Morgenstern was at her console, her gaze ratcheting between 3 different monitors. She was impeccably dressed in a suit of some expensive, silky material that Lyle couldn't have afforded on her salary and would have thought would be more difficult on the chief supervisor's salary. A riddle for another time. The middle-aged woman looked permanently startled by life in general, eyes wide, asking, What? Who? Me? Lyle announced, Ma'am, we've got incoming hostiles. And didn't that sound ridiculously cinematic? Morgenstern glanced up, her hand went to her chest, her eyes widened even more. Yes, I can see that. Dirk came in and set himself by the doorway, arms crossed, practically vibrating. Lyle was hemmed in. It only made her angry. What's your plan? Lyle asked. Lyle honestly didn't know what would happen, what Morgenstern would say. Would she get defensive, make excuses? The chief supervisor folded her hands on her desk and met Lyle's gaze. I, for one, am curious why you didn't know about this ahead of time and work to prevent it. Shouldn't you have been tracking in-system communications? Her gaze went to Dirk, and eyebrow twitched. Any anomaly in traffic control should have been flagged, don't you think? Dirk added with a determined nod. All Lyle's communications, or attempts at communications, were logged. That wouldn't matter. They'd dig in and tell their own story. Yeah, she could get angry, get defensive. They wanted her to get defensive, to stammer denials, to give them a guilty-sounding crack they could break open and shove all the blame into. Fine. She'd take it. She took one last look at Morgenstern's glass-like refusal to react and Dirk's smarm. You'll have a nice day, why don't you? Dirk lobbed a few parting shots, something about unfriendly work environments and overstepping boundaries. She ignored him. She marched to her own workstation, stored a copy of all her comms transcripts, and sent that resignation memo. Finally. At last, a weight lifted, even though all her authorizations and access would likely be cut off immediately, leaving her trapped on Roth in the middle of a hostile takeover. Not that that would mean anything anyway when the Trade Guild ship got here. Well, the ship was probably already here, and she wanted a front row seat. She wasn't sure what it meant that everyone she ran into, from custodial techs on up to section heads, stopped her to ask what was going on. Did she somehow look like she knew what she was doing? Instead of telling them that she had resigned and officially had nothing to do with anything, she held on to her professional demeanor. The crew didn't deserve this any more than she did. Well, most of them didn't. Trade Guild is launching an external labor audit. I recommend cooperating. Just be patient. Her smile felt strained to breaking, but must have imparted some reassurance. People seemed more at ease after talking to her anyway. She arrived at the docking station, industrial, full of struts and tubing, big external hatches lined up at intervals. The place was dusty, no matter how well ore and mineral cargo were secured in containers. Dust inevitably accompanied mining operations. Made her nose itch whenever she came down here. The Mildiv ship was locking on and securing the hatch, able to do the work themselves without station side crew. Made sense, with a ship whose main purpose seemed to be invasion. That left a dozen or so cargo crew personnel watching, pacing, their anxiety ramping up. One of the docking chiefs spotted her. What do we do? Do we resist? Should we try locking the doors? Lyle shrugged. Fighting would be valiant and useless. Well, this is above our pay grade. Let's just watch the show. The control pad next to the hatch cycled through and lit green, and the steel mechanism of the hatch groaned open. Would a squadron of soldiers appear? Would they come out shooting and ask questions later? A couple of techs fled down the corridor, unwilling to risk whatever was about to come through the hatch. A couple of others glanced at Lyle to see what she was doing. She waited. The hatch slid open, and two figures emerged. Just two. They really only needed two, dressed like that, in full, streamlined armor that gleamed quicksilver gray under the docking bay lights, with close-fitting helmets and full-face visors. They looked inhuman, except for the way they moved, shifting to take up guard positions on either side of the hatch, scanning the gathered crew. They had guns, but the weapons remained holstered at their sides. Apparently, the crew outside was not a threat. Nobody be a hero, right? Lyle murmured to her compatriots. We don't get paid enough for this. Someone chuckled darkly. Some kind of consultation must have been happening via private comms. After a few moments of waiting, when no one in the docking bay seemed inclined to cause problems, a few more people emerged. No one else was wearing a full suit of armor, but Lyle had no doubt that they were all armed and capable of taking care of themselves. A couple of bureaucratic types, escorted by crew in militaristic uniforms, left the Visigoth and went to other hatches, where shuttles to the planet were waiting for them. The auditing team, then. At this, some of the tension broke. Oddly, this was familiar. These people were just trying to do their jobs. Meanwhile, the taller of the two figures in armor was coming towards her. She glanced around, and yes, she was the most senior Roth crew person here. At least, she had been before she'd resigned a half an hour ago. She stood her ground, might have been smarter to get herself anywhere else. After the last couple of hours, she wasn't thinking that fast. She stood her ground and hoped she looked badass. With the silvered-out faceplate, she couldn't see the soldiers' eyes, but they clearly studied her, judging by the curious tilt to their head. Then the visor slid back into the helmet, revealing a roughly handsome man with a bit of stubble on a square jaw. "You're Supervisor Rinzelli?" he asked. Was she responsible, in other words? Was she a legitimate point of contact? Oh, she hoped not. Yeah? Actually, no, I'm not anymore. I just resigned. His expression broke into a ridiculously charming grin. Why did he need armor when he could just smile at everyone? This one was trouble. She just knew it. "Wondered about that," he said. "We've been tracking your internal comms." "Yeah, of course you have," she muttered. She shrugged, sheepish. In hindsight, sending the resignation felt childish, like a tantrum, cowardly. I just couldn't take it anymore. "Understandable. I have to be honest, this job was a lot easier than we were expecting. We didn't think the code sabotaging the comms array would last more than an hour or two. It wouldn't have if she'd had her way. This was all just so typical. I knew I should have gone out to do a manual reboot myself," she said, mostly to herself. "You do that kind of thing?" the soldier asked, seeming genuinely curious. "Get your hands dirty." "Yeah, sometimes." "Is all your work in Navcom, or do you have more general systems management experience?" After today, she was thinking she could make a go at Morgenstern's job if she wanted. This suddenly felt like more than general conversation. "Systems management would be the next step on my career path, I believe," she answered. "I think at this stage my options are wide open." "Come on, ask me about my strengths and weaknesses." "I'm Graf, by the way." He held out his gloved hand. She took it reflexively and murmured, "Lyle. Hi." "So," he said, "you looking for a job?" Her breath caught. Was she? That meditative dream returned, floating in low G in deep space with a competent crew. Oh, bliss. "It's more of a quartermaster position," he went on. "Supply and organization, but we can always use someone with good problem-solving skills and a little, panache." "Panache?" "That's right. So, what do you say?" His eyes twinkled. What sort of business did the Visigoth usually get up to? Well, she had today as a sample, but she had questions. "Depends," she said cautiously. "On what?" "How many memos do you lot send on an average day?" He scoffed. "Well, who has time for memos? We just use comms. So, you want to talk to the captain, or not?" "I would love to talk to your captain." What are your thoughts on the story? You can send me a email. I'm kate@clarksworldmagazine.com, and that is Clark with an E. I hope you're doing well. We have one more story left for you for the month of October, should you so choose. And until then, my dear listener, I bid you a very fond and hopefully very temporary farewell.